What's up, everybody? This is Post-Production Pie with srlounge.com. Welcome to another Lightroom 4 weekly edit. In this episode, we're going to be editing through this raw image here, and our overall theme is kind of finding the image within the image, if you will. Well, I remember back in art history when we were learning about art and everything, because that is what you do in art history. We were learning about Michelangelo, and he said at one point, I don't know if this was an interview or if he's just writing things down for the history books, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but he basically said that every stone has already has a sculpture inside of it, that it's the sculptor's job to bring it out. All right. So as the photographer and as an editor, it is your job to find that image within your image. This is a beautiful shot that was taken actually by one of our second shooters in training, Ryan. And I love what he was doing, this scene, kind of using this bush as sort of a framing object to create this really cool voyeuristic look to this overall shot. But the composition could use a little bit of help. And we're going to do that by cropping and then post-producing the image. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you guys this current crop really isn't that great of anything, but we can make it a really cool negative space crop by simply changing the aspect ratio as well as kind of just pulling in our crop a bit. So let's do that now. I'm going to hit R to pull up my cropping tool. Let's jump down. I'm going to do enter custom, and we're going to set this to 2:1. I love this aspect ratio because, well, it's awesome. It's awesome. What else can I say? I'm just kidding. It's a great aspect ratio because everybody loves kind of that panoramic landscape look. It's a great look. They go awesome on walls. And you know what? For a client to get a really high quality print or canvas in this aspect ratio, they have to come to the studio because standard printing companies can't print in this format, and you got to go to a professional lab. Now, this isn't kind of a reason to, I'm not saying to do this so that you make more money, but I'm saying that it's a great way of getting these kind of images up on your client's walls in a manner that will do you proud. All right, so what we're going to do now is pull this in, and you know what? A lot of times I have my second shooter shoot in full RAW because I end up doing a lot of cropping because as they're learning, they might not come off with the best compositions. Already we have this beautiful composition now with this negative space. It looks great. The only thing that could possibly make this image a little bit better is just if the bride was turned a little bit more so we could see more of her profile, but not really too much you can do about that. He's shooting in the moment and you can't really change. This is a first look scene anyway. Now, what we're going to do is go up and process this using the Lightroom 4 preset system. We will, of course, go through our settings, so don't you fret. All right, so let's go to the top and we're going to select the HDR Light preset. I just want to bring out a little bit of the color and the tone, not too much. Now from here, all I want to do really is just, you know what, let's just, actually, you know what, I might not do anything to it. It looks fine right here. What I might do is just leave it as this kind of like darker mood look, but give it some warmth. So I'm going to bring my tint up to say plus 30, 35-ish. I want to get a lot of magenta or a lot of pinks in there because I want to create a very rich, warm mood tone to this shot. So at this point, I'm going to keep warming it up, and I'm not going to adjust exposure yet because adding this temperature or warming it up like this is going to add brightness to it because we're basically increasing the yellows and the greens and everything like that, and it is going to add a little bit of luminosity essentially. So I'm going to adjust this into place first, and then if I feel like I need to, I will tweak my exposure just a bit. I'm going to bring down tint a tiny bit, just one notch, and now from here I can say let's take up the exposure just a bit. And I'm going to leave it probably right here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it a bit higher and then burn down the edges so that essentially we have this nice kind of focus pulling us into that little area of our image. All right. Now let's go and grab our, actually, you know what? Let's do our little lens vignetting first. And let's just pull in a little lens vignette. And this is a situation where you generally would want to use like a post-crop vignette. Why? Because we've already cropped the image. So let me just undo this. A post-crop vignette is going to actually vignette the image after the crop. I don't know if did I go back too far on my, yeah, I did on my exposure adjustment. So what's going to happen now is since we've cropped in, if we use the standard lens vignetting, you'll notice that it doesn't catch the right edge much because we've cropped in so much. So let me bring this effect up to our standard amount of plus 30, and now let's use the post-crop vignette to basically add it in. What we're going to do is we're going to switch this to we can either leave it on highlight or color, but don't use paint overlay because it's going to give you like this darkening effect that looks kind of nasty. So let's just flip between either color or highlight, and let's see which one gives us a better effect on this image. I want to keep it very, very subtle too, so I'm just going to keep it about -30, adjust in the midpoint a bit, and really I don't want it to go over their faces at all, and this is why we're going to end up doing most of this with a brush. But let's just kind of check that out and flip back and forth and see. I think I like the color priority just a little bit better on this image. All right, so I'm going to leave it right there. Let's go back up and adjust up the exposure a tiny bit. And I'm going to actually adjust the contrast and exposure up. Now let's grab a little brush. Okay, so let's grab a burning brush. We're going to go and let's do, I don't know if I want to do a detail enhancer really. We can do a nature color enhancer, but I'm going to bring the exposure down actually instead of going the other way. So I'm just going to drag this over our brush, or not our brush, but our bush in the foreground. All right, just kind of go over it, and then I'm going to reduce or hold Alt Option on a Mac to basically paint it out of them. All right, now if I want, I can tweak this by just clicking on it and dragging right or left. I just want to kind of get it to a point where it blends really nicely with the background here with our couple, and it looks like it's pretty good right about there. I might tweak the exposure individually just to see where I want it. I'm going to leave it probably about -0.2. That's looking pretty solid right there. From here, we can tweak the overall temperature a little bit more. I think I kind of want it a little bit on the warmer side. I don't know. It's a mood shot, right? Mood shots, who cares? It can be as warm as we want it to. I really just want to get a little bit more detail in them and get a little bit of extra warmth out of it. So I'm just raising up shadows a tiny bit. And that is essentially it, okay? So we've basically brought out this image. I'm going to go through the settings in just 1 second, but take a look at this. Here's the before. Sorry, let me show you the before. That's not the before. Let me go back to, I'm going to create a virtual copy actually, because this is flipping to a different version of our image because it's a virtual copy and not the original. So here's the original, and here is that after. By the way, if you're wondering why it does that, if you create a virtual copy with settings applied, and then you, if you have an image with settings applied to it, and then create a virtual copy, the settings or the before settings for that next virtual copy becomes the settings that were on that prior image, if that makes sense. So when you hit \, it doesn't revert back to the original, it reverts back to what the previous one that you made a copy of was. Hopefully that isn't too confusing. But here's that original image, and here is kind of that final look that we got out of it. Now, the last thing I want to do, well, actually, let's go through the settings first, and then I'll do my last thing. And this would be an image that would work really well for a fade too, and whatever you want to do to it, you know. But the last thing I want to do to this is make it black and white. So let's go over the settings first before we do that. We have temperature at 7600, tint at 35. We have exposure raised at 0.5, additional contrast at 60. We have that light HDR preset basically reducing highlights and whites, adding shadows and blacks, and then we boosted shadows just a tiny bit more just to see a little more detail in their faces. We've got clarity at -10, but you know this can be at 0 or kind of anywhere in that range. I like it a little bit on that softer side, so -10 is nice for these portrait type images. Vibrance is at -10. If we go up, it's going to kind of have too much color, and I don't really want that look. I kind of like a subtle muted look to my tones, but that's really more of a preference thing than anything. In our tone curve, we have a subtle S-shaped curve that's just adding a bit of contrast to our image. And in our detail, we have our standard sharpening and noise reduction since we have applied so much boost to the overall shadows. In lens vignetting, we have the standard amount of vignetting applied, but then we added the post-crop vignette just to darken the edges a bit. But since they're so close to this top border, we can't go too far because if we pull it in with the midpoint, it's going to basically cover them unless we were to alter the roundness and stuff like that, which to me, it's just much easier using a brush, all right? So that's it for this. Let's do one other thing, and I'm going to create that virtual copy, and then we're just going to hit V because this is a perfect image for a nice little black and white. I'm going to raise the exposure and the contrast just a bit. I'm also going to add a bit more of my blacks to it. All right, so that's our two final images. Let's take a look at our two final images along with our original. I'm going to select all three of these, hit N to jump into survey mode. So here is the three finals, our mood shot with kind of that nice warm tone, our black and white over here, and then we have that original. Now this is kind of what I mean about seeing the image within the image, because a lot of people would just see that image and they throw it out, go, oh, that's a bullseye composition, or it's not, you know, what they want. But it's still a great shot. We just have to know exactly how to essentially bring it out. Hopefully this helped you guys out, and we'll see you guys in the next Lightroom 4 edit.